Hello and welcome back to the show. Today we are reviewing a game which resulted in Everton's first victory of the season. 3-1 winners against Brentford away from home. This one had very similar vibes to the Brighton fixture last year where we walloped the Seagulls on their home deck 5-1. Look, this game could have gone one of two ways. Obviously, we know how this one ended. Brentford did not rock up. They did have an injury in the warm-up as well, and that really set the tone for the day. But it did have very similar shades of the Fulham and the Wolves fixtures. You know, in the first half, we had quite a few opportunities to really get a nice little buffer on Brentford, but they were the ones who scored to tie things up, seemingly out of nothing. It was their first opportunity in the half, and we went into the break with the potential for everything to unravel. But to our credit, we were able to respond and actually, see some fruit for our labour. So it was great to see a very important win. And then obviously we have a couple fixtures coming up which we can build off this strong performance. And look, the optimism didn't really show pre-game because we saw the team list and we were like, what is this? We talk about selection integrity and, Sean Dyche wanting ruthlessness. Well, obviously a lot of players defensively weren't too bad, but didn't really show that cutting edge on the attack. And we needed to see something different. And the only change was Arnaut Danjuma out, James Garner in. And we were like, well, Garner doesn't operate well on a wing. And Danjuma is the only one that really goes at attackers. So it seemed like a lose-lose kind of situation. But you know what? James Garner was used very well today. And same with Dwight McNeil, who were both operating in very centralized areas. Obviously, they can play make from those positions much better than, having to be stuck on the wing and you feel really enclosed out wide. The story of the game today, though, was exploiting that aerial threat, and Brentford looked very vulnerable in, on both ends. Defensively, they were struggling because obviously we had a fair bit of representation in the height department. When they attacked, they were lacking skill. And they were trying to, obviously do these diagonal balls out wide, but it was never suiting the winger. They were never able to get on the end of it. And if it did get there, they were very much disadvantaged. So Mikolenko and Ashley Young, Ashley Young got a card in the first minute of the game and he never seemed to be troubled after that. I mean, that was probably something Brentford really needed to target a lot more. I talked about the word support last week, and that was fully on show today with our attacking. The overloads, a lot more players getting into the box and pressing forward, coinciding with where the attack was at or where the ball was at in that attack. And in a win, there's going to be an abundance of positives. I mean, I'm going to give my player of the game to Dwight McNeil, but there is a number of honourable mentions. Jared Branthwaite, I mean, he is Mr. Consistent this year. He's probably been our most consistent performer. I find myself saying the same things week after week with JB. He's assured. He knows when to commit, when to hold back. He never seems to be flustered, even though he's only 19, 20. It's just great to see. And it is so far-fetched, so far distant what we had to experience with Michael Keane. Jared Branthwaite is a breath of fresh air. But if I'm going to talk about Dwight McNeil, my pick for the player of the game, obviously this win was driven by hunger, and I do think that Dwight McNeil embodied that today. His gut running, his tackling, it was his game to a T. He commanded the game as he moved more centrally, as we talked about. The fullbacks were able to provide protection, but his engine even allowed him to, be able to make up that ground if the ball was lost. But that barely happened with Dwight McNeil. His body use was very, very essential in looking after the ball today. There were a couple times where he looked to be pushed off it or dispositioned, but he was rarely beaten on the ball. And that obviously put us in good stead to, have the ball in more attacking areas and actually have a bit of impetus going forward. And we obviously can't forget, the assist he was able to acquire as a result of that ability to command, in the attacking half. That's exactly what we've been looking for. It was missing last week. Obviously, there was a different game plan going into that game, given the vast difference in skill level. But today he really dominated in everything he did with and without the ball. Amadou Onana, he was pretty strong today. A very nice passing display, and obviously his tackling. You know what you're going to get from him. If there's one thing that he probably prides himself on, it's his tackling. His ability to make up ground after losing the ball, or when we get exposed as the ball, traverses through the midfield. That can be questioned at times. And that was probably our undoing for the first goal and only goal we conceded. Garnagay turned it over, I think. But, Onana was a bit relaxed. He just left the defenders to do the work. That aside, he was pretty strong today. Beto, his flick-ons were superb. He's very, very smart with the ball in the air. Sometimes it looks a bit, misdirected with a lot of other strikers we've had in the last couple of years, but he knows how to advantage his teammates in a very, very subtle way, And a couple times he was able to play teammates through because of, a redirect with his head from, a long ball. So that's obviously an asset we haven't had for years, but we're going to benefit strongly from. Doucoure, he had a very bad game last week and a lot of people were calling for his head. I was one of those involved in that movement. But today, even though he did have his moments where it was a little bit, he left a little bit to be desired, he was much better in terms of, being cohesive and working alongside the striker and being supportive, as we've mentioned. And obviously the goal, it was a great take. He could have had a second. It was very, very similar, if not identical in terms of, being able to shield the ball, favour the right side and nearly smack it top bins. That would have been a hell of a goal if he scored the second one. But, he had a really good game today, I do feel, obviously, like many others. We can talk about James Garner as well. The third goal was all his. He was able to, intercept, force the turnover, then capitalise on the turnover with an excellent through ball, a perfectly weighted pass to DCL. Speaking of which, what a luxury we have on our hands here. We have that luxury of now being able to bring on a striker who can hold his own and provide something different to Beto. He can play 25 minutes only has to play 25 minutes. He has the opportunity to score, and this is all something we can experience next week because we can adopt the same tactics next week because he's playing, he's healthy, so we're not running him into the ground because we're so reliant on him and he is still having an impact. There's been games where he's come on and it hasn't been like that, but there is a potential for that to happen. And, if Beto loses form, DCL will hold him accountable as if to say, well, if you're not going to play well, then I'll be into the starting 11. But then we can, we've got a lot of creativity with interchanging the two, playing them both together. It's going to be a much better season in terms of output from DCL, purely because we now have that luxury to play him more sparingly, and he probably is going to be better for it with the impact, he can make. Let's just talk about one negative. Garnagay. If you have a bit of selection integrity, you will drop Garnagay because, my guy, he is so slow. For a counter-attacking team, you can't have this guy being the outlet, bringing the ball up and moving it so slowly and being slow with decision-making. Onana would get it to him, on counter-attacking situations where he'd win the ball, easy outlet. Completely ruined when Garnagay will slow the play up and completely stunt momentum from that attack. You know, some of his passing was unacceptable and really lackluster, almost apathetic, and he was very slow to react when turning it over as well. So, look, if Deitch wants tough, ruthless players, I don't think Garnegay was awful, but he definitely was the worst on the pitch in a game where nearly our entire starting 11 fired. So yeah, Deitch, if you want tough players, this guy's not it. So look, it was a win we absolutely needed. It's good to be out of the bottom three. I would like to see some changes, potentially more positional. James Garner playing out wide, I'd like to see him more central. Garnegay out of the side, that's another thing you can do. You know, I think it's about refinements from this game. You know, there's a lot of good to take. This is a gauge of what we can achieve at our highest level. And the issue is always consistency. If we can be more consistent in taking our chances, well, if the Brentford, the Wolves game, the Fulham game is anything to go off, then we can win our next two, and we definitely can reposition ourselves into a much better position, you know, before the international break, and then obviously you reset. So that's going to do it from me. I hope you enjoyed this one. Excuse the sore throat. But, you know, it's finally good to talk about something good with this football club, because there has been a lot of doom and gloom in the last couple of weeks, especially with, you know, all the takeover drama, the stadium drama, the financial insecurities, and obviously the on-field product not being up to scratch. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure to show your support on it. We will be back next week for what could be the second win in a row. We've got Luton. It's a winnable fixture on paper. You look at it and you say, we need to get the job done. As we said, you know, to capitalize on the momentum that we gather from a very, very strong performance. Have a good one. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.